The people of St. Louis were still feeling a little on edge when a series of unusual bank robberies caught everyone's attention. Not because of violence. No, that wasn't it. But because of just how bizarre and almost childish they seemed. It all started with Isaac Perry, a 39-year-old local who, by all accounts, seemed pretty ordinary. He wasn't known for any criminal record. Neighbors described him as quiet and kept to himself. But what they didn't know was that Perry had a secret plan brewing, a plan that would end up puzzling even seasoned FBI agents. In early 2024, Isaac walked into a small branch bank in St. Louis, clutching something in his hand. Not a gun, not a weapon. It was a handwritten note. And not just any note. It was carefully decorated. Yes, decorated. With little hand-drawn hearts in red and pink ink. The message was simple. Give me all the money. I have a gun. No alarms. Please. It was polite. It was strange. And it caught the teller completely off guard. The teller, fearing for their life, handed over a sum of cash without raising any kind of alarm. Isaac took the money and left, just like that. No chaos. No shouting. No getaway car speeding off with tires screeching. FBI Special Agent Laura Mitchell would later say, "It was almost surreal. We've seen a lot of things, but a bank robbery with a love note, that was a first for us." But the story doesn't end there. A few months later, when everyone had just about moved on from the strange heart note robber incident, it happened again. Same bank, same method, different day. This time, though, the FBI and local police were ready. Investigators had already been keeping a watchful eye on the area, suspecting that the man responsible for the first robbery might strike again. Still, no one could predict that he would be so bold as to hit the exact same bank a second time. When Isaac Perry returned, the scene was almost identical. Another note, once again decorated with those unmistakable, clumsy little hearts, and the same quiet, almost apologetic tone in his demands. It was almost as if he thought the hearts would somehow soften the blow. But this time, the bank staff had been trained to act fast. Without tipping off Isaac, one of the employees silently triggered a hidden alarm as they handed over the cash. Cameras captured every second. Not just a theft, but also Perry's calm and oddly careful behavior. FBI agents, working closely with the St. Louis Police Department, reviewed the surveillance footage frame by frame. It didn't take long for them to notice something critical. Perry's clothing, his build, even the way he held the note, all of it matched the footage from the first robbery. Detective Mark Harrison, who had been involved from the beginning, put it simply, he made it too easy for us. Same guy, same routine, same bank. It's almost like he wanted to get caught. The evidence was stacking up fast. Along with the footage, the notes themselves were sent to forensic specialists. They carefully examined the paper, the handwriting, even the ink. The hearts, ironically, were their biggest clue, drawn with the same pen, the same pressure, the same distinctive hand. Meanwhile, the FBI began digging into Isaac Perry's background. No history of violent crime. No major financial troubles that jumped out right away. Just an ordinary man who, for reasons still unclear, had decided that robbery, and not just any robbery, but a strangely tender-looking one, was his answer. And as the agents closed in, one question hung over everyone's heads. What would drive a man like Isaac Perry to rob the same bank twice, armed with nothing but a love note? Authorities didn't waste time. Armed with clear images from the surveillance footage and forensic confirmation linking the notes, the FBI and St. Louis police moved to identify their suspect. It didn't take long before Isaac Perry's name surfaced. A few tips from the community, combined with facial recognition matches from DMV records, put him directly in the spotlight. He had no alibi for the times of either robbery, and his overall profile fit too perfectly to be a coincidence. Agents approached Isaac's modest apartment on the outskirts of the city. Neighbors described the scene as calm, almost too calm. No dramatic standoff, no high-speed chase. Isaac opened the door, looked at the badge, and simply said, "I know why you're here." Inside, agents found clothing matching the footage, including a jacket with a faded heart-shaped doodle on the inner lining. They also discovered remnants of his handwritten notes, practice sheets where Isaac had sketched dozens of tiny hearts. Try and get them just right. One FBI agent later commented, "It was bizarre. Most robbers plan their escape routes. Isaac, he planned how perfect the little hearts on his threat should look." During questioning, Isaac was surprisingly forthcoming. He admitted to both robberies without much hesitation. His explanation was almost as strange as the crimes themselves. He said he didn't want to scare anyone. He wasn't looking to hurt anybody. The hearts were his way of showing he meant no harm, even though he understood the fear he caused. In his mind, the decorations were supposed to make the experience less traumatic. It was clear that Isaac wasn't your typical bank robber. There was something different about him, something that didn't quite fit the usual criminal profile. But despite his odd motivations, the fact remained. He had committed 2 federal crimes, and both the FBI and local prosecutors were preparing to make sure he would be held fully accountable. As the case moved forward, investigators dug deeper into Isaac Perry's background, hoping to find the missing pieces that could explain his strange behavior. What they uncovered painted a portrait of a man who had quietly been slipping through the cracks for years. Isaac had once been a promising student, even earning a college degree in graphic design. But after a series of personal setbacks, a failed marriage, the loss of a long-term job, and mounting medical bills, his life began to unravel. By 2023, Isaac was living alone, struggling to pay rent, and working occasional temp jobs that barely covered basic expenses. Friends described him as withdrawn but polite, someone who didn't seem capable of violence but was clearly carrying a heavy burden. Special Agent Mitchell later explained, "It wasn't desperation in the usual sense. It was more like he felt invisible, like nobody noticed him anymore. Maybe in a twisted way, the notes and the hearts were his way of being seen again." Psychological experts brought in by the prosecution suggested that Isaac's behavior showed signs of untreated depression and possible delusional thinking. He wasn't trying to create fear. In his mind, he was trying to communicate, even during a crime. Still, mental health challenges didn't excuse the fact that Isaac had robbed a bank not once, but twice. And even though he hadn't physically harmed anyone, he had threatened violence, a serious offense under federal law. Meanwhile, the stolen money was another problem. When agents asked what he had done with the cash, Isaac's answer was painfully simple. "I used it to pay my rent, bought groceries, paid a few hospital bills. That's it." There were no luxury purchases, no vacations, no big spending sprees. Just survival. It was a pitiful confession that didn't change the outcome of the case, but added a complicated layer to how prosecutors would present to a jury. And as trial preparations began, one thing became clear. Isaac Perry's story was tragic in its own way, but the law was not about to overlook what he had done. In the weeks leading up to the trial, both the FBI and the St. Louis Police Department made sure every detail of the investigation was airtight. They knew the defense might try to argue diminished responsibility due to Isaac's mental health issues, so the case had to be rock solid. Agents returned to the bank multiple times, reviewing security procedures, retracing Isaac's steps, and collecting witness statements from the employees he had confronted. Each teller who interacted with him described the same unsettling contradiction. Isaac seemed almost embarrassed as he passed over the note, as if he regretted what he was doing even while he was doing it. Detective Harrison summed it up during a press briefing. "It's rare we see a suspect commit a crime with what almost looks like guilt written all over their face. But guilt doesn't erase the crime." When Isaac's trial finally began, the courtroom was packed. Local news outlets had picked up the story, fascinated by the oddity of it. The man who robbed a bank with hearts drawn on his demands. It was the kind of headline that caught people's imagination, even as it highlighted the serious consequences behind the crime. The prosecution painted a clear picture. Isaac Perry had knowingly committed 2 separate robberies. He had threatened bank staff with the idea of a weapon, regardless of whether he actually had one. The emotional toll on the victims was real, even if no physical harm had come to them. The defense, meanwhile, tried to steer the focus toward Isaac's mental state. They argued that he hadn't intended true harm, and that his actions were rooted in desperation, not malice. For several days, both sides presented evidence and called witnesses. Bank employees testified about the fear they felt during and after the robberies. FBI forensic analysts explained how the handwriting and ink matched across both incidents. And a court-appointed psychologist provided insight into Isaac's deteriorating mental health. But at the end of it all, the facts remained. Isaac Perry had robbed a federally insured bank twice, and now he would have to face the consequences. The jury didn't take long to reach a verdict. After only a few hours of deliberation, they found Isaac Perry guilty on multiple federal charges, including 2 counts of bank robbery and making threats during the commission of a crime. At sentencing, Isaac stood quietly, listening as the judge read the decision. There were no outbursts, no pleas for leniency. When asked if he had anything to say, Isaac simply replied, "I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt anyone." The judge acknowledged the unusual circumstances of the case, the lack of violence, the evident mental health struggles, but made it clear that the seriousness of the crimes could not be ignored. Bank employees and customers have been terrified, lives have been disrupted, and the integrity of public safety have been threatened. Isaac was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release. The courtroom was silent as he was led away. Special Agent Mitchell later reflected, "It's a sad case, no doubt, but even sad cases have victims, and our job is to protect the public, no matter how unusual the circumstances." The community of St. Louis slowly moved on from the strange chapter that had briefly unsettled their quiet city. The Heart Note robber, as the media had called him, became a cautionary tale, a reminder that desperation can drive even the most unassuming people to make choices that change lives forever. And for Isaac Perry, those choices would now define the rest of his future.